About 1 more minute and we'll get started.
It's fruit with coconut yogurt. Yeah, it's very good.
I'm gonna mute. Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. It is 2 o'clock, so thank you everyone who has joined so far. Courtney is on a plane as we speak on her way home from Colorado from a workshop she did, so I am kicking off our meeting today. I'm Amy Amaya, Operations Manager with CKearney Consulting, and we are very excited to have Stacey Ho with WSP as our guest speaker today. And her presentation, we will send her slides and a worksheet she already sent to me in our follow-up email that I'll send out tomorrow along with a survey. So you'll have access to that and to the recording of today's presentation. If you have any questions, we can have Q&A at the end, or you can use the chat box to type in a question. Or if you're having any technology issues, let me know. If you want to share your webcam, you're more than welcome. If not, that's okay. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Stacey and let her introduce herself and begin her presentation.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to do this. Because you can see from the title of my presentation, I am definitely a database junkie. But just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I actually did start as a marketing assistant, marketing coordinator. I've done pretty much every level of this job you can ever imagine. One day somebody showed me how to pull a resume out of Deltek, and I thought it was the neatest thing since sliced bread, and I was hooked. And I've been doing database management or some form of it ever since. I have worked in BST, in Deltek, in Cosential, in Microsoft Dynamics, in Oracle. So I've got a pretty broad background. And one of the things I'll talk about today is don't ask me which software is best. They're all pretty much the same. But now, currently, I work for WSP, and my role is two-part. I am a data analyst, so I actually audit the CRM system, but I do mostly a lot of predictive forecasting and reporting and dashboarding on our CRM and on our opportunities for the West transportation arm of this firm. It's a pretty cool, fun job. And also I oversee a team of people who update information in our marketing information system, so resumes and project descriptions. I work mainly in Oracle and Excel, and my other team works mainly in Microsoft Dynamics. So that's our current position. So I'm going to just go through a few slides, but I thought there should be plenty of time for questions. So ping me if you have something, or wait till the end and we can have some discussion. So I just have to start off by saying that anybody who called in today, I'm probably preaching to the choir. All of you are probably going to nod your head like a million times, like, yes, yes, yes. So the reason why I gladly give slides and handouts is because you'll probably want to give this presentation to someone else in your firm, not me. So just recognize that I know that I'm talking to an audience that cares. And one of the first things I have to sort of give a nod to is that there's a reason why marketing databases are popular or even becoming more popular. And it's because marketing information is really challenging. It's really hard to have a lot of duplicate systems. You don't know which system is accurate or right. Those systems don't talk to each other. You have knowledge isolation is what I call. It's just, yeah, I'm already seeing heads nodding, which is where, you know, you can't find information. You have slow or no reporting. And then you've got this like non-existent BD budget. Right? So I definitely am acknowledging that all of these are reasons why people approach looking for a database or seeking out or trying to get their firm to buy into a database. And I think that when you have or start those conversations, or even if you have a system now and maybe you're looking to improve that system, the conversation has to be around not it's a CRM system, it's a database, it's a system of any kind. It really has to be shifted to its intellectual capital. And what is that? What is intellectual capital? What does that mean? Well, the only thing your firm has to sell, it's not a widget, it's not a product, you don't have shoes, you don't have a fancy purse, you're not Coach. You have what information is in the brains of the heads of the people that you work with. That's all you have. So I term that in every firm I've ever worked for intellectual capital. And I like the term capital because in the operations terms, people put dollar signs next to that. So that's your project information, your people's skills, your leads and opportunities, your relationships with your clients, your past history, and for those of you that are interested, forecasting and workloading, all of that stuff too can come out of these systems. And that's really, I think, what drives every AEC firm. So when you shift that conversation towards the dollar value of, or the ROI of capturing this information versus it's a database, it's a system, it's a software, that's when I think you can shift the conversation and the buy-in in wanting this kind of a system or improving whatever system you currently have, because even that's an investment. So myth number 2 for me is this is not a large firm issue. And I should say these are not technology issues. So I say this is not a large firm issue because I think that even firms that are small, 10, 20 people, should be looking at very simple ways to organize and manage their data now. In fact, I highly encourage any firm to start it at that point because it only gets harder the bigger the firm. And I also say that it's like baby steps, right? I don't care if you're using folders and folder structures and Excel files. It's still a system. So don't approach it as a technology issue. Approach it as more of a process issue. So hopefully some of you guys are ready to change the channel within your firm, or you are already dialing into that and you're already changing the channel. And some of the things I talk about towards the end will hopefully benefit you. So number 1, I think everybody probably already knows this, but you absolutely have to have buy-in from the top. I just have never seen a successful system go it alone, where a marketer is rogue and says, I just want to build a system and I have no money, and I just have never seen that be successful. So definitely you need to have buy-in, and the part about who you need to have buy-in from it gets a little bit tricky, because getting everybody that you need on board, like I said, feels a little bit like eating hot dogs with a chopstick, right? There's all these different people you need to combine. Your boss, your boss's boss, the IT group, because of course it is eventually some sort of technological system. Most likely your accounting department. Even if the systems are going to be disparate, you still need some information from them. Most likely your HR department, because you've got people, resumes involved, and then just your whole marketing team. So there's a lot of different people, and I haven't listed them all, but there's a lot of people depending on your firm that you've got to get to come together to discuss this. Then there's the technology part you have to bring together. Which software? Should it integrate with our accounting system? Do we already have a system? Do we like that system? And one I want to talk about a little bit more later on is, do I get support from that company that I purchased the software from? Because I also think that's really important. So there's the people, there's the technology, but even bigger than those two are the process. So there's that, do we use an existing process when we're collecting this data? Do we create a whole new process? Do we modify a process? There's all these discussions about, do we even have a process at all? So I think these three things are the most important things that you have to do in order to be successful in implementing any kind of information system. So first off, let's talk a little bit about the people. The biggest and hardest conversation that you will have throughout the life of owning a system is who owns or who is responsible for what data. And it's going to differ for almost every field. So sometimes project managers might own or be giving you that information. Sometimes the data ownership might be with HR. Sometimes it might be with accounting. I think that it's really important to continue to have in the beginning, but also to continue to have conversations around who's responsible for what pieces of the data. And I think that also will start to coincide with conversations around redundancy and duplication. And so I think who owns what is a really important conversation. I also think you need to have some early conversations around the access and accountability, because if a certain person owns a certain data set, they also have to have a certain level of access, and then there has to be some accountability for them upkeeping and maintaining what they own. So in the beginning, but also throughout the life of any database system, I think this who owns what conversation is really important. Then I think you can start to talk a little bit about software selection. And I get more phone calls now than I think I ever got about what software should I choose? I don't have a big budget, what software should I choose? Or I really want something that's, all these features, what software should I use? And I'll tell you the same thing I tell everyone else. Kind of doesn't matter. To be honest with you, it really doesn't matter. I kind of think you can pound a square into any hole if you really have the support structure. But that said, there are a few things with software selection that I do think are important. The first is, talk to who your current provider is if you have one. Now, really small firms, if you're using an off-the-shelf accounting product, that might not work for you. So you might be going it cold and looking at some software. But if you already have an accounting system, especially one that's AEC focused, you probably already have access to or the ability to purchase an additional product that would support marketing. So I always tell people, because of disparate systems, look at your current provider, see what they offer. And from there, you can decide if you want to engage new partners or you want to look at other things. I do know some really large firms that also will build it themselves. I've actually seen firms do a pretty good job. So there is an option if you've got a good IT group to potentially build it yourself. Or I have seen firms successfully use off-the-shelf products like Salesforce or, even simpler CRM systems that are free, or even just use their SharePoint sites and things like that. So I do think there are some off-the-shelf products that you can use to get started. So which one should you pick? To me, it's the best fit, right? It's whatever is the best fit for your firm. And I also think that it might be the first best fit, but plan or think about how you could grow. So if the best first fit for you is SharePoint software, what can you do so that if you do purchase, let's say, Deltek or CoCentral down the road, how can I transfer my data easily later? So just think in terms of, what can I do now, and what can I do 5 years from now, and what can I do to prepare myself for the steps in between? And I think I've moved to my next slide already. If the shoe fits, and I think that's really what it is with software, really. It's whatever is best for your firm. And I even tell people, if what's best for your firm is an Excel spreadsheet, start there. Like, it's okay. That's what's best for you. This is one of my favorite quotes, and this is probably the last thing I have to say about software is, says, don't confuse having the systems with using them. With technology, possession isn't 9/10 of the law. One of my absolute favorite quotes. You can have the best, coolest system. It can pull resumes in InDesign with photos and blah. And if you aren't using it correctly, if you aren't spending the time to get the data in there and auditing it, it doesn't matter. No one will use it. So software is such a tiny piece of this. And I think almost probably everyone on this call who already has software will just go, yeah. It's so true. Okay, so this is a list of what I think are some of the typical implementation process items. I kind of wanted to review them because I think it might help some of you who are even re-implementing think about steps that you might not have thought of. And I think that they're important steps. So things that I think typically happen when you're starting to think about the implementation or re-implementation of a database system. In my mind, you know, the number one first thing that needs to happen is you need to decide who is your internal administration champion, and they need some power training. And I think that it's really important that whoever you decide on as your key, you know, champion or star player or whatever you want to call them, that they get some true hands-on, dirty, all the way down to the depths of training on that system. And I think that it will be key to a successful implementation. And then there's a lot of data mapping and configuration. One of the handouts I actually, you'll see is a get started guide, and it is a lot about, you know, taking a proposal and breaking it out into all the pieces. What fields would I need if I were to recreate this proposal? What fields would I need if I were to recreate this resume? Sort of that backwards look, and then mapping each of those to fields you actually already have in your system or want to have in your system, or your system comes standard with, whatever those cases might be. So there's a lot of data mapping, and then there's some configuration, like, do I get that data from another system? Does it push over? All of that type of thing. And I think those are almost like, could almost be like creating a website. If you've ever done that, you go up on the wall and you draw the circles and you connect the dots and you map everything. And then there's data conversion, and data conversion can look different for everyone. If you had a system, your data conversion might be simple. If you didn't have a system, your data conversion might literally be data entry. That might actually be your system. I'll tell you a story right now. My firm is, I want to say, 10,000 people US wide. We just launched Microsoft Dynamics for resumes and databases. We formerly had nothing but Word documents for resumes. I kid you not. So I just had a sole employee work for almost 18 months transferring resumes into a database. I mean, kid you not. So data conversion can be a big process if you don't have an existing system. So take that into account when you're looking at a system, is getting that data converted. And it could just be as simple as getting it out of a finance system and converting it over too. There can be simple ways. It's not always difficult. And then, do you need custom templates? Can you create those templates? Do you need somebody to create those templates? And a step I see a lot of people skip, I actually think my firm skipped this a little bit lately, and I've been going back and trying to fix this, is some training guides. If you actually want users to use your product, one training is not enough. And I think a very customized training guide, even if you get a training guide from your software provider, customizing it to your firm will improve your user adoptance. And then something I call final staging, which is where you get a sort of a look at your system, you test it, right? And then I cannot encourage this enough. I consider live staff training the most important thing that you can do when you're rolling out a system. I think hands-on, if you can. Every training I've ever done has been them on the computer and me giving them step-by-step commands on how to, let's say, enter or edit a resume, or enter and edit a job description, or enter and edit an opportunity. I don't drive. I don't have a computer. I talk them through it. I feel like the only way you remember is to do. I also follow that up with monthly calls where I'll do what are called 10-minute pieces. So I'll say, this is how to, like, let's say, create a budget for your opportunity in 10 minutes. Or this is how you approve a budget in 10 minutes. Or this is how you, whatever. And I think training is continual. And that's because for those of you that have systems, as you know, you either review and adjust or you die. There's no other way to do this. You review and you adjust, because either you're getting upgrades to your system, or you're realizing you forgot something, or you're realizing you could improve how you do something. Whatever it is, you're reviewing, you're adjusting, or you die. And that's just, I think, how any database is. So those are what I think are some of the bigger implementation things. And I'm sure everyone on this call could add to this list. So if you want to toss out ideas for implementation later too, I think that's great, because these are just my top. When people call me a lot of times and ask me about implementation decisions, I have a hard time. I feel like a lot of it is weighing the risk versus the reward for you. And so what I'm going to go over are a couple of things that are my own lessons learned, but they may be different for your firm. So the first one is, people always ask me, should this be marketing led, or should someone else in my firm lead this, like the IT group or whatever? Whew, that's a big question. I've seen it both ways, and I've seen it, I've seen an IT person drive it, it's been great. I've seen a marketing person drive it, it's been great. I think the key word is driver. That's the key word. Whoever has that time, ability, and passion for driving it should be your administrator. And then I get asked the question of, well, can I DIY it, or how much should I DIY it? How much should I do it myself? Because we don't have a big budget, and I hear this all the time. I don't have an answer for that either. So I've been at firms where we tried to go almost totally alone, and if there was a good driver, it was pretty successful. I don't know that you can completely DIY something without some software support somewhere, but I think, again, this might sort of go back to the baby steps. Like, you can DIY Excel spreadsheets and you can DIY reports. What I do think, though, is you probably will see a larger return on investment if you pay for the right support. So I don't want to tell everyone, oh yeah, just DIY everything, because I do think that there's value in getting support from consultants or from your software provider. And I think sometimes you just have to look at that as, will it save me more time, or will it save me more money? And in those cases, I definitely think it's worth it. I get asked all the time about standards. Like, do you have a list of standards? No, every firm has probably their own brand and their own standards, but you should create a set of standards if you don't have one. So making a list of, are we using P. E. Are we spelling out interstate? Are we, God, there's all these like little things that come up. And so if you don't have standards, start making a list of standards and keep them consistent with your brand. If you already have a communications group, they probably have a great brand standard already for you to start with. I get asked about methods of training. I think I already gave you my opinion on that, live, in person. Please don't try to do it any other way. And then I get asked about, for large firms, I get asked, how should I roll this out? Should I just like open the floodgates and let everybody in? Should I do one group? Should I do another group? I don't know. I don't have a best answer. I will say that if you open the floodgates, what probably will happen is you will have to have definitely some sort of support email or support person who's going to be pretty busy for a while. I also think that when you open the floodgates like that, you often have to retrain because you don't catch everyone. But I've also seen it very successful where I've gone like office to office over the course of like 6 months and done a rollout like that, a little bit phased. So I think it's okay. I think it just sort of depends on how high the demand is for your product. If you've never had a system before and this is a pretty good system, you know, open it up, let everybody in. I get asked a lot about data conversion, like how much should I bring in? Oh man, if you've got an old firm, that's a really tough one. I worked at a firm that was almost 100 years old, and people were wanting projects from 50 years ago because they were on someone's resume. I mean, because they'd been there for 50 years. Man, I don't know. Do we really need a project from, yeah, I get the shaking, no. So I think this is a conversation you should have, though. Is it the last 10 years? Is it the last 15 years? Do you even have data but that far back? And I think that you should just sort of make a decision, make a cutoff decision, and go with it and roll with it. And then what do we do with the old system? Now, I don't get asked this question a lot, but I put it on there because this is where I see the most downfall, or for me, the lesson learned in why you don't have user adoption. And it's because you try to launch a new system, but it's not 100%, not everything's been transferred. It's okay, you know, so people are pulling it out, but they're like, it's not all there. I got to go back to my old system or my old proposal, or I got to go find it back. And yeah, there probably is a point where you're like getting over the hill, you know, but when you're over the hill and you're going down, turn off the old system. I don't care if you make it read only or close it all together or archive it or whatever, but if you don't find a point to turn it off, you will always have someone who goes back and uses it or complains about adopting your new system. And I think the number one failure rate I've seen in new systems is not turning off the old system. Okay, I gotta talk about a really big elephant in the room, process. And that's because process is the part where we all have to talk to each other about being accountable for data. So now you got a software and all the people are on board, but if you don't have a process, you will not succeed. So a lot of these I've kind of talked about, but I do think some of them are things that you should consider, like using existing or creating new standards, when to collect what information. So when a new employee comes in, do we collect it right when they come in? Do we wait for them to have worked on projects? Do we use forms? Man, this is a tough one because I've seen some really cool collection forms out there. But then part of me goes, but then why do we have a database and another form? So that's a conversation for probably you to have about who has access, and then for who doesn't, what do you do? Is it the staff's responsibility to put the data in, or the marketing team's responsible? I have a feeling every one of you, if I could see your faces, would be like, it's always the marketing team. I know, right? It is probably. But I don't know. I think I successfully have seen firms, especially for CRM systems, who have seller doers who do get in and put in their leads and opportunities. So just have that discussion. Is it a staff responsibility or not? Because if you don't have the discussion, everybody's going, but it's not my problem, you know. So have the discussion. Mandatory versus optional. Ooh, how much can we really make them give us? A lot of times when I was helping clients customize their database, they would ask for like, I want length of pipeline and number of feet and square footage of the building. And they'd be like, make it mandatory. I'm like, oh, jeez, you really want a lot. I think the least amount that you can live with as mandatory, and then the rest optional. If you really need something, obviously, you just need to be prepared to have to probably dig for it. And then there's accountability, reporting, auditing, and those are a lot of the things that I think this user group has been super helpful with. So keep tuning into these user group, because I think that's one of the things that we've talked about a lot are the reporting, auditing. Okay, so you have a system, it's up and running. Now you have these maintenance issues. So for those of you that have been waiting, this is where I get to the part of where you have a system and you're like, but it's not working great. So I am a strong believer in everybody loves to diagnose the problem. I think especially engineers and scientists, but I think we're all a lot of type A people, and we love to say like what's wrong with something. And so I say give whatever you have to anybody, even if it's a page full of blanks, and just let them tell you what's wrong. And this is where you have to put on your little hat that says like, I'm not dumb, but I'm gonna let you tell me I'm dumb. Because they will tell you everything that's wrong with it, and you'll go, I know, but I need the data from you. So just let them bleh, and then get it from them. So I think that's one of the things you have to tell yourself when you have a database is it's okay if it's wrong. Tell me what I can do to fix it. And then smile, and then go out and have a drink later. Number 2, my favorite, I actually have little pins. I swear, I have little pins that say this. If anybody wants a pen, I could probably get you one. Data entry is not a dirty word, but I know for you marketing people, it is. So here's some things that you can do to sort of shift your mindset a little bit about how to deal with all this data entry. Number 1, I said it in my very second slide, I think, it's intellectual capital. You need to do that. You know, one of the things I did when I launched my very first system was when I was doing the training for the users, I actually broke at lunch. I brought in the entire office and I gave a presentation on what is intellectual capital. And then I left by saying, and everybody in that training room over there is going to start asking you for this information, and you better not put them off. So I think you need to educate the firm about why people are asking for this information and why it's important. And then I think you have to demonstrate the benefits, and that is that you get very consistent resumes, you get expanded searches, there's time savings. The very first time I launched a resume system, I was thinking about this a little bit, and so I polled marketers and asked them how long it took them to put together resumes for a proposal, for an average proposal, and it was something like, 12 hours. It was a long time because we didn't have any sort of database system. It was all Word. They had to format everything to be consistent. And when we launched our system, I polled them again, and I got a resounding 30 minutes or less. And I just did the math. That time savings for the marketing team paid for the system in and of itself. So demonstrate those kinds of benefits. And then, again, creating awareness for not just everyone. I kind of said that. And then for me, results. If you are starting a new system, I think it's really okay to say, even to more than just your marketing team, to your whole operations team, we're going to commit to having 100 descriptions in the system by the end of the year, or we're going to commit to having 10. I mean, whatever you feel like you can achieve, but then demonstrating those results. Look how we can pull all the resumes for this group, or look how we can do this, and tout your own and flout your own horn, so to say. And then a little bit more about the excuses part for those of us that have to do this. So for those of you that have to do the data entry, this goes a little bit back to the blog post that CKearney just posted that I did on, how do I get to this? How do I find the time to do this? How do I get over this data entry piece of my life? And I think that what it comes down to is things like setting a realistic goal, right? Like, I can commit to one project description a month. that's 12 project descriptions a year. I can commit to 2 resumes a week. That's, you know, whatever is realistic for you. There's something called Eat the Frog. This is actually, it comes from something like crazy Mark Twain quote where he said, if the first thing I had to do in the morning was eat a frog, it'd be the worst thing ever. So, you know, I'm going to do it and get it done. So it's this concept of like, do the worst thing first. So if data entry is your frog, then do it in the morning, like first thing, and just get it off your plate. Actually, I have I'm going to confess something really cheesy. I have a folder called Frog Food. And anytime I get new data that needs to be edited and I can't get to it right away, I put it in my Frog Food folder. And then when I set aside my time for updating data, I go to my Frog Food folder. So that's just a tip for you. The other thing would be to do it right now. You know, if you have the time, just do it, get it done with, move on. And other ideas are like making it fun. You know, maybe it's a project description potluck or a resume pizza party or something like that. And I would love to hear fun ideas from other people. Another one would be to just interview people. You know, just go and sit right there with them, pull it up, do it. I know engineers and scientists like checklists. Oh, I hate to say it, but they do. They like checklists. So you could create a checklist. Here's the things I need from you. And again, just displaying those results to help yourself see the success that you've achieved. All right, so when you are done, or when you're not done, because it's never done, but when you've launched your system, the other thing I highly recommend, which I've already said, is demonstrating those results. So here are some of the results that I like to demonstrate for people. Things like fewer floaters. So I have a picture of these little kids floating in a pool. Sometimes I put it up there on the screen when I talk about how we picked up like 12 new descriptions this month or whatever it is, just to show people that we really are picking up this data. And I think it's important because one of the #1 things I hear from project managers is, well, you asked for this before, don't you already have it? And I think they feel like we don't value their time, when in fact we just don't have a storage space for this information. So demonstrating those items I think is important. You know, demonstrating how you can keep whole project knowledge. So when I've had successful systems, one of the things I've done is tailored a resume or tailored project descriptions for a new proposal right from the system and sent them straight to the proposal manager and sort of said, hey, I've already done this for you. What do you think? And they'll go, where'd you get all this information? Or I'll even pull a list of projects and say, of all these projects, do any of these fit? You know, so what I'm basically doing is I'm demonstrating the value of this database by pre-working for them, right? And I think that can be very powerful. The other thing I think I really like to use, especially CRM systems for, are making these really powerful proposal statements. So sometimes I'm trying to write a cover letter and I don't know, I'm looking for something and I go into the system and I look and I see that we've done $12 million worth of work with this client over the last 10 years for 17 projects. Man, I just blew up with ideas for things to write in this cover letter. We've been partnering with you. This is how successful we've been. You know, you can make some really powerful statements in your proposal with historical data from your CRM system. And then you have to demonstrate more results because no matter how long you own your system, you have to keep this going. So things like marketing staff searching the same data, fewer requests of your PMCMs, spending less time formatting. I think it talked about our resumes and how we spent less time doing that, more time customizing, and just overall elevating that role of the marketing person as someone who can now spend more time on strategy and customization and less time on just digging through old proposals to find what you need. Okay, some final lessons learned for me. And I could probably add to this list now because I have actually created this a while ago, but the administrator or the champion's job is never, ever over, ever, ever. It's never over. So whoever you dedicate to that in your firm, it's not a temporary position. Somebody always wants more. Oh God, there's always this person who's like, they're either great with Excel or they're really like, they're like me, they're really data minded and they're like, oh, I could do all this and that. And you're like, yeah, I don't have time for that, or we're just not going there. So there's always somebody who wants more. You have to sort of let that part of the job go. There's always something that's missing. This goes back to the let them diagnose the problem. Training really does matter for adoption. 100% matters. If you don't handhold and walk and continue to do training, then you won't have adoption. The historical data can be really overwhelming. I really encourage you to have that conversation about what the cutoff is and just live with it, because it can be very overwhelming if you have a large history. The rollout can be challenging. I definitely say that it's probably going to be more than one rollout. That goes back to the training matters. And the mandatory versus voluntary is never an easy choice for me either. I feel like, you know, what I would want to be mandatory is not always what everybody else would want to be mandatory. So I do find that over time, I do change sometimes my mind about what is mandatory and what is voluntary. And sometimes I change it just based on, you know, the results of the year. So I really wish I would have tracked whether or not we interviewed for every project. And so now I'm going to make that mandatory, that kind of look back. And for me, the biggest thing I've seen, and for everybody who's been at any AEC firm, you know this, any kind of change causes heartache. I mean, just anything. So you have to approach it with that in mind, knowing that you're going to have people who just don't want to change. Actually, one thing I've done is when I've done testing of systems, I've picked my most change averse person to help me with testing, because I figure if they can like something about the system, I'm probably doing it right. So that's just something to think about. And then there's all these things that go along with sustaining the momentum. I have a lot of upper management people who always say, so when is the project done? What, done? No, it's never done. So you have to kind of explain to them, like, no, my job was not temporary. Beware of busy marketers. So this industry, especially marketers, we tend to come and go. I'll just be honest. It can sometimes be a rotating door, and or we're very busy, and sometimes it's completely out of our control. So have some discussions around protection of time for the system and how you can do that. And I understand it might not be possible every month of every year, but some months or sometimes have some protection, whether it's, you know, a whole day or an hour or two, whatever. I used to tell my marketers to find the due date for their proposal, look out a week, and put 2 hours on their calendar, block it out. And those 2 hours would be when they would do their post-proposal checklist. So they would go through the proposal, find all the things they updated, and make those updates in the system. And I would try really hard to protect that time for them. So just some ideas there. Expect rapidly changing technology. Man, I can't believe how fast software providers are rolling out either new features or even whole new products. So I think I talked about this when I talked about software selection. Think of your current software as a baby step to something better. Probably most likely you'll want to advance at some point. Continue training and focus on the positive and reward the positive. I think it's awesome to do things like look at the number of users you've had log in, or give every one of those people a Starbucks card or something. I don't know, just really think about ways to focus and reward those positives of what's happening with this system. Because I think given enough thrust, pigs fly just fine. And I think it is like making a pig fly a little bit, launching these kind of systems. So, okay, it's my last little piece here. They say it takes 2 to tango. Well, it does take a lot more than that to get a database up and running. And for those of you on this call, this is probably your biggest heartache, is the number of people it takes to get this off the ground. So the first steps might feel like a really bad dance, like, eek. But I do think that with a little bit of work, you can all celebrate together in the end. And I think that the celebration part is really important. So that's my presentation. I think hopefully we've still got a little bit of time for Q&A and more discussion. And I would love to hear others' ideas on making it fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Stacey. We do actually have one question in the chat bar. Do you recommend bringing in data from your accounting system based on a dollar value or just historical limit?
That's a tough one. I think that question might depend a little bit on what do you currently use in your proposals or your resumes. So in the past, I've done it 2 ways. Either I've brought data over from the system that's just as is, like agreement to agreement or contract to contract. I've also done it where we've sort of joined all the phases of a project and had like a master total. I think this is what they're getting at. And I don't know that there's a right answer other than probably what do you use most in your proposals?
I agree with that. We have, I've seen clients that have a constraint on their, data connector that links their CRM to their accounting system based on, no projects under $1 million come over, because those are the only projects they use in their proposals. So go back to what you're using in your proposals. If it's a wide range, small and large projects, then maybe go that historical limit route, pick a date and start there and don't worry about the dollar limit.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of about who owns the data ultimately too. So if the owner of the financial data is your financial department, you can bring over whatever you want. But if you've decided that the owner is finance, then if you run into any questions or you get to that point where you've exceeded history that you've brought over, then you go to your finance group and you ask the question. But because you've decided they're the owner, now they know why you're coming to you.
True. Any other questions? If you can't unmute yourself, I can unmute you. I'm going to go ahead or you can use the chat bar. I had a question about earlier in the presentation when you were talking about people who owns what. That's obviously always a big discussion item, and we run into a lot of clients, especially during implementation or even re-implementations. They're fighting this fight and they don't really want to let go of that control and let people enter their own information, especially like new hires. If they have access to the system,
Yep.
Why are you not letting them enter their own personnel information? That type of thing. Because to me, it's almost another training opportunity and getting them buy-in into the system right off the bat. Do you have any advice for that letting go of control?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of your company culture too. Like I have this tendency to match my company culture. So I've been at firms where the culture is that, God, we don't want to send any information out there that's inaccurate, and we don't want to take any risks. We're completely risk averse. So we need reviewers on everything. And I kind of go with that. So I set in review functions, or I make it go through HR or whatever first.
Mm-hmm.
But I am personally a non-risk averse person. I'm like, throw it in there. Woo! Fly by the seat of my pants. So I am the person who would say, and especially if I'm working with a smaller company or if their culture is very open, I kind of am like, yeah, let the user have the power. you know, and if it's inaccurate, you know, hopefully we're doing check systems at the proposal stage that are catching some of that.
Yeah.
But a little bit culture there.
Yeah, and then go back and reinforce the training, right?
Yep.
It's all about education. So, all right. Anybody else have a question before we sign
And
off?
I would love to hear if anyone out there is doing anything fun for data entry or getting data from people. How you know, how are they doing that? Fun things, because I feel like that's the one area where I feel like we could have more fun.
I agree. That's always a topic of conversation too. And I know Courtney in the past has given some examples of learning with libations or whatever it is, you know, bring
I like that.
Yeah, bring food. People will always come if you offer them food or treats or something, you know. So, but does anybody else on the line have any fun ideas or something you're actually doing? I don't know if people can unmute themselves.
I know.
I don't know if they can or not. This is my first go around with Zoom, so I'm trying to unmute and it's not working. Unmute all. Let's try that.
Oh. Well, that opened the floodgates.
I unmuted everyone.
Sam's the only dude that's been drinking. No.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
Okay. I think I muted myself. Here we go. Let's see, another question. I've never done anything fun, but that's a great idea, seeing as I'm viewed as a nag trying to gather data.
The nag. Yeah, right? Yeah, that's such a hard one too, the nag thing. And again, I actually think that nag thing though goes back to like, if you aren't demonstrating results, then you are continued to be seen as a nag. But if you're showing results to everyone, or you're actually demonstrating the value of that data that you're capturing, then they might start to perceive why you're asking a little bit differently. I know sometimes that's really challenging. So here's a tip I have too on that. When I've worked at firms where there's been various marketers, like I can shout to the rooftops, like, we need this. And but then I could have a marketer from another office walk in and give a presentation and say the exact same thing. And they're like, we got to listen to her. So if you have another marketer in another office, have them come and tell your office what you want them to do that they're not listening to you about. Or if you're a small office and you're a single marketer, trade with like another marketer that's not a competing office maybe, and just say, hey, like, what is your office struggling with that you keep telling them? I'll come give a free lunch and learn. And then you do the same for my office. And I swear it's something about the other person, and they're like, oh yeah.
Just a new voice to listen to, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah. Any other questions? We collected information by going around to our offices with a March Madness basketball theme, stress balls, and snacks.
Oh, I love it.
I like that.
March Madness. Oh, I got to think about that. We could totally prepare for that now, too.
Yeah. And
I wonder
the winner,
if you could have a bracket too, the winners.
That's what I was going to say, the bracket, and then the winner can, you know, get some prize.
Office party or something. Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah, somebody else did the same thing. That's cool. Very cool. All right. Any other questions or comments? Give it a few minutes. If not, then I am going to send out a follow-up email that will include a quick survey, just so we can keep our user groups topics fresh. So if you have any ideas, please feel free to send those in. Again, we're always looking for guest speakers. We're creating our 2020 calendar right now, so if you want to be a guest speaker on a certain topic, you can let us know. I will have Stacey's slides and her handout she referred to during her presentation in the email, as well as a link to the recording and a link to her blog post we put out this morning about Become an Information Management Slayer. If you haven't read it, it was a really good article with some really good tips. So I will have all of that in our follow-up email. And thank you again, Stacey. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And my information's on the last slide, so if anybody wants to contact me, feel free.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's all for today. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see y'all in December.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.